2007, I was a freshman going on my sophomore in college, and my brother Martin was still in high school. We have two much younger siblings, so at the time, they were around elementary school age. My parents decided to take a cruise for their 20th wedding anniversary that year, so my brother and I were voluntold to watch my younger brother and sister, Cole and Charlotte. My brother's best friend, Christian, stayed with us while my parents were gone, and he helped us plan fun activities with the younger siblings. One idea they were particularly excited about was a camping trip, as my family had never been particularly outdoorsy in the past. Their eyes lit up at the prospect of cooking our dinner over a campfire and fishing in the stream. Since it was early summertime, we had the great luck of warm but not too hot weather, and a beautiful, clear sky for stargazing. Finally packed and ready for a somewhat long drive to the mountains, we checked into our campsite before dark, and Cole and Charlotte helped us to set up the tent. It was strange, but there were no other people at the campground, which was unusual for this time of year. Once we finished dinner, the young brother and sister were ready to sleep, so Martin, Christian, and I stayed awake a little longer, catching up and getting things ready for the next morning. Suddenly, a white Astrovan pulled up into the camping spot directly next to ours. He had dozens to choose from, but chose to park right next to us. "Oh well," Christian said. "At least we have company now." He called out a quick hello to the new neighbor, with no response back. I got an uneasy feeling almost immediately, but decided to push it aside and continue to get the fishing poles ready for the morning and put the food away for the night to ward off bears and wild animals. Over the next hour or so, things started to get weird. The man parked next to us got out of his van to sit at the picnic table with only a small fire. From our roaring fire, I could see that he was just looking directly at us. However, his fire died out completely several minutes later, and he continued just sitting there. I could feel him staring, but I couldn't see his face anymore. He was just sitting there, breathing. Christian and Martin noticed that I was uneasy, and they picked up on how creepy the situation started to become. Martin whispered, "Why is he breathing like that? I don't feel safe anymore." I told Christian and Martin that I was going to stay awake because I didn't trust this guy. As soon as they moved from the fire into their tents, the man rose from his picnic table and started moving towards us. I called out, "Hello?" with no response from him. Finally, in a whim of panic, I demanded that we pack up and get the fuck home immediately. Christian and Martin got out of their tents and saw the figure of the man just standing there, staring at us, breathing hard. We tried to stay as quiet and calm as possible while we packed up, to not alarm Cole and Charlotte. Finally, throwing everything into the trunk, we drove away, not looking back. Before leaving the site itself, I asked if we could go to the check-in area at the lodge to see what the hell was going on and see if they knew anything more. What was this guy's deal? But to my surprise, there was no one else registered at the campsite that evening. The story doesn't end there, though. About 6 months later, I was in my sophomore year of school when a local hiker went missing in a county over from where we camped and where I went to college. She was doing something so normal, hiking with her dog. Sadly, she turned up several months later, murdered and found in a white Astro van. When the news finally released photos of the van and the man's face, I knew it was him. I got a phone call from both my brother and his friend, and they recognized him too. We came to find out that it wasn't his first murder several years later, and he became known as the National Forest serial killer. I sincerely mean it when I say that I'm an incredibly cautious camper now because of this encounter. Thinking that it could have been us, or my younger siblings, still gives me nightmares to this day. We recently had a reunion, Christian, Martin, and I, and we talked about what happened to us with more than 10 years gone by. It's amazing we all remembered the details as they are etched in our memories forever. So, creepy, heavy breathing, would-be serial killer, camping neighbor, let's never meet. Ever. I live in Southern Oregon, a beautiful place in the West filled with some of the most beautiful forests one will ever see. The national forest that I live against, I know like the back of my hand. I know stories from long ago about places in the middle of nowhere that have strange names, and that often draws me to these places to explore and feel nostalgic. These forests also have things about them that are off. Locals talk about how people disappear all the time in the woods, sometimes over drugs, sometimes over foul play, and other times people just go for a hunt or hike and are never seen again. I've spent several years in the deep wilderness hiking almost every day. The incident I'm about to tell you changed how I felt about the forest. My roommate and I left our home on the outskirts of the forest for a hike to a place that's basically a swamp flat, a small area of marshy swamp in a bowl-like canyon high up in the mountains. There's one road in and one road out. As we climbed the mountain, the rain had started to pick up. It had been mostly drizzling that day, but living in the Pacific Northwest, you get used to that, and it doesn't stop you from adventure. We finally get up to the flats, and it's time to explore. We walk the trail into the flats, and as we admire the old growth trees surrounding the marsh, the wind starts to pick up. There was a nasty storm coming in. The trees started to rock back and forth and make horrible snapping sounds. And there isn't many safe places in a forest like this to take shelter from falling trees and branches. So we decided it was time to hike out. We hiked back to the car and were relieved to get in it and out of the storm. The car was parked in a small turnout on the side of the road. We sat there for a few minutes in the car, taking off our jackets and turning the heat on and such. That's when the truck pulled up. In the middle of a bad storm, in the complete middle of nowhere, a really old beat-up pickup truck drives up and parks in front of our car, not completely blocking the car, but coming damn near close. A burly man steps out of the driver's seat and turns and looks at us. I have to say, this is the only time in my entire life that I have thought to myself, something here isn't right. The look on the guy's face gave me that instinctual feeling of fight or flight. As we watch him walk around his truck, I tell my roommate, "Go, just go, start the car and leave, now." As he starts the car and begins to pull off, the man was reaching behind the seat of his truck and pulls out a long rifle. That's when my roommate hits the gas and flew out of there. As we pull away, the man pulls the gun out and points it in our direction and looks me right in the eyes. The feeling I got was, you were going to die today. I will never forget the look on his face. We got home, told our neighbors about the incident, and proceeded about our day. When we got in the car the next morning to drive to town, the starter failed on the car. I often think to myself, had it failed up there, or had that bad storm not come in and shoot us away, things could have very well gone south that day. Years ago, when I was still a teenager, my friend Justin and I would often go longboarding at night, as my friends and I were quite the night owls. We loved the freedom of almost never seeing another soul on the roads or the paths that we frequented. Even when using main roads, it would be very rare to see a car out so late in such a rural area, and you could see and hear them coming from very far away due to their headlights and the noise of the vehicle disrupting the peaceful silence of the night. We were really into it at the time and would often ride our boards for miles and miles, sometimes not arriving home until the sun was up. One particular night, we decided to ride a few miles away from our usual back roads to take one of our favorite hidden routes. It began with a narrow paved path that was the only piece of land separating two sides of a long lake. It would often sink under due to rain, and we wanted to seize the opportunity to use it before it rained and went underwater again. It was roughly 2 miles long and was extremely relaxing to ride through due to the scenery. After making it to the end of the lake, we decided to continue moving and turn into a very close path that leads directly into a densely wooded wilderness preservation. As we came up the first hill, we looked down at the bottom into the blackness. We both noticed what appeared to be a tiny moving ball of dim light down there. It moved so strangely, and it was extremely difficult to make out what it was. Rather than shine our flashlight down, we curiously watched it for a few more moments, whispering to each other about what it could possibly be. All at once, that small light turned into multiple blinding lights and extremely loud revving sounds, overwhelming our senses that had become accustomed to the dark and silence. Acting purely on fear, we instantly turned around and ran as fast as we could, hearing yelling and revving gaining behind us. By sheer luck, we managed to roll off the path into a very dark, very overgrown hole in the side of a hill, overlooking where we had just come from. We decided to hide in the natural dugout of this hill, hoping the plants and darkness would be enough to protect us from whatever was happening out there. We watched our pursuers right up to where we had originally been standing. There were 4 men, 2 on 4-wheelers and 2 on full-sized motorcycles. They were yelling at each other about something, but we couldn't make out what they were saying due to the distance we had covered. We felt safe enough to whisper very softly to each other and speculated who these people could be. Our first thought was that they could be park rangers of some kind, although we had never seen one here in the many times we had been through, and honestly, we doubted that this county had the budget, or even the desire to have one patrol the deep woods at night. Besides that, these men were on vehicles entirely inappropriate for the paved bike trails, and they were very angry about something. They called out to us for a while, yelling things like, "We know you're out there," and "We can see you, come on out." We stayed silent and decided to call their bluff instead of running. Eventually, we clearly heard one of the men yell, "Find them now!" and smash a bottle. That had erased any hope that these were just park rangers. We watched them split up, each of them going a different way down the series of paths on their vehicles, including the path we came from. It took us what felt like ages to even move. We were frozen in terror inside that dugout, watching the lights from the vehicles travel through the woods and paths, one of them already coming full circle and passing the point he started from. I thought about calling for help, but I was too afraid to open my phone, in fear that even the smallest amount of light would give away our location. After waiting for the lights of the vehicles to reach their farthest distance yet, we finally summoned the nerve to get up and try to run somewhere far enough from these people to safely make a call. We ran as hard and fast as we could through the woods. Since their headlights gave away their location on the paths, we would hide again whenever we felt that they were getting too close. Our available hiding spots were getting progressively worse as the woods became less dense, and the fear I felt waiting for one of them to drive past us while basically only being covered in leaves and plants may still be unmatched to this day. Finally, we emerged from the woods onto the intersection of the 2 main roads, far from where we started. We dug down into the ditch to call for help. When I opened my phone, I noticed I had recent missed calls from one of our other friends, Connor, who we were supposed to meet up with after our longboard excursion. I called him and frantically asked where he was. Luck was with us again. He hadn't given up on our plans despite us ignoring him, and was only a few miles away, already heading in our direction. I gave him the names of the 2 streets that we were near the corner of, and explained that we needed to be picked up right away. He agreed to speed over to us while Justin and I waited in hiding. Thankfully, Connor arrived before any of those men did. We bolted into the back seats of his car, yelling for him to get out of there, and he took off. Relief doesn't begin to describe what I felt being safely driven home after everything I had just experienced. After explaining everything that happened to Connor, we ended up just moving on with our night and decided not to call the police. We figured they would be gone by the time any officer made it out there, and that we would only be putting ourselves at risk by admitting to breaking the law by taking those paths so late at night. I still have no idea what happened or who those people were. I've been told all kinds of theories from friends and family that have heard this story. Some think we walked right up to a huge drug deal. Justin and I later admitted to each other that when the revving started, we couldn't see. Our minds went straight to chainsaw-wielding horror movie serial killer. So I suppose it could have been much worse. Frustratingly enough, whatever those men thought we saw that made them want to catch us so badly, we never actually saw. We'll never really know, I suppose.